Capping the mash means withholding dark roasted grains until later in the mash process, and I'm experimenting with this by making 2 Dunkelweizen beers, a classic German wheat beer. I'm looking for as much clove-like character as I can get, so in one batch I'm capping the mash during the ferulic acid rest to try to maximise ferulic acid production, which purportedly leads to more clove-like aromas in the finished beer. Then in the other batch I'm tossing in all the grains, light and dark, together all at once. Will participants be able to distinguish the 2 beers? Let's find out. This episode is sponsored by Delta Brewing Systems. More on them in a bit. So it's time to brew Dunkelweizen. Okay. First of all, water salts. Nothing too crazy in here. Just 4 grams of calcium chloride and 3 grams each of Epsom salt and gypsum. I've preheated both of these 2 batches of water to the same temperature, 113 Fahrenheit or 45 Celsius, and they're both going to receive the ferulic. They're both going to receive the ferulic acid rest. But one of them, this one, in fact, I'm putting all of the grains in at once. Now it doesn't look particularly dark. There we go. It looks a bit darker now. You can see some of the carafa popping out here. I dropped a degree, 112 right now, but this won't take long to get up to 113 again. So I'm going to hold this ferulic acid rest for 15 minutes. All right, we're nearly at 15 minutes now. Temperature's crept up 1 degree, 114. Now this temperature range can go anywhere from about 104 to 122 Fahrenheit, very specific numbers. I think that's because actually in Celsius it makes more sense, 4250 Celsius. So I'm now going to take pH reading and not being at all careful about getting hot worse on me because it's not hot. So here's my pH meter, let's see what we get. This is temperature adjusted, so it does take a little while to figure out how warm it is, and then that adjusts the pH. It takes a minute to get a reading here. Yes, oscillating between 5.3 and 5.2. Now purportedly, if I withhold the dark grains, which I'm going to do in this batch, I should see a higher pH, and that should lead to more ferulic acid extraction. But in the meantime, I'm going to bump this guy up now to 152 Fahrenheit, that's 67 Celsius, and let it rest for a further 45 minutes. Now it's time to deal with this batch here. So batch number 2 is going to start all the same, just with these water salts. Now normally I would add a touch of lactic acid in here. Typically with a ferulic acid rest though, you would leave that until after you've done the rest as well, and that would have meant a second variable between these 2 things. So I'm not adding any lactic acid in these 2 batches. Given this had a pH of 5.2 anyway, I was pretty much in the ballpark. Right, so in here I now have all of my grains except the dark ones. So for this recipe I'm using 3 light grains, I guess you'd say. So I'm using mainly wheat malt, that's the main ingredient in this beer. I'm also using Pilsner malt and I'm using Vienna malt. So what I'm withholding are the darker malts, and let's get this in. So I am again at 113 Fahrenheit, 45 Celsius. It's looking a lot lighter, a lot paler than that other one, which of course it would. So now I'm going to let this guy rest for 15 minutes. Okay, that's nearly 15 minutes. Look at this guy. Milky. Okay, while that's registering its reading, yeah, it's time now to add in the dark malts. So what do I have here? Well, I'm using 2 dark malts. I'm using Caramunic 3. I have 12 ounces of that, and this has an SRM of around 50. I think it's 53. And then the other dark malt I'm adding is Carafe 2. I'm adding 5 ounces of that, and that has an SRM around 300. It's quite dark, but it's not very much. I wonder if it's really going to make much of a difference. There we go, and just that small amount of grain completely transforms the colour to this really chocolatey kind of a light milk chocolate colour now. It's incredible. So 5.5, a higher mash pH. So I think that proves that at least the theory is sound. Of course, the difference is it's making a difference to the finished beer. 45-minute mash rest now at 152.
Now a quick word on today's sponsor, Delta Brewing Systems. Delta Brewing Systems offers some of the lowest prices on stainless steel brewing gear, like the Fern Tank, which in addition to holding 8 gallons or 30 litres of wort, comes with a domed lid to reduce the chances of a messy blow-off. Plus, it can hold up to 2 psi of pressure for closed transfers. Delta Brewing Systems also has their own line of brew kettles, as well as one of the lowest priced all-in-one electric brewing systems out there, and their prices are shockingly low. If you're in the market for legit stainless gear that won't break the bank, do yourself a favor and head over to deltabrewingsystems.com today.
Ferulic acid is something I first experimented with in following Matthew from Mean Brew's recipe for a Dunkelweizen bock. The purpose of this rest is to break down certain compounds in the malt to release ferulic acid. That is then converted by the yeast during fermentation into a compound that contributes a clove-like flavour to the beer, which is characteristic of many German wheat beers, including the style I'm brewing here, Dunkelweizen. The more ferulic acid we produce in the mash, the more clove-like the finished beer should be. Now, each enzyme involved in mashing has an optimal pH range where it works most efficiently. The idea of capping the mash or withholding the darker grains means I'll be mashing at a higher pH, which is exactly what I'm seeing. And the theory is that the pH of 5.5, that's the cap mash, is more conducive to ferulic acid production than the pH of 5.2 that I'm seeing in the uncapped mash. Alright, enough mash talk. Next up is the boil, the addition of hops, and a bit of a change in my brewing process that I thought was going to be a good idea. So I'm going to try something here, a bit of DIY. I have a vent hood up here. It's not big enough. It's not really big enough for me when I have 2 kettles going on. But I am right next to a door. See, that's the outside. So I've got this thing, this camera-y thing, and do you think this will work? I don't know, I think it might be doing something. Alright, so the hops, Perla hops, 18 grams of this going in at the start of the boil, and then that is it for 60 minutes, and I am boiling, so put them in now. You know, I think this is kind of working. It definitely is pushing out the steam outdoors, but means I've got to leave my door open and goddamn flies getting in. Alright. This guy has reached boil now, so now I'm going to be adding in my 18 ounces of Bell hops. Well, after chilling both worts and getting them into my fermenter, I took some readings. Now, the final gravity reading, not great. I got 1042 and 1043. So once again, I'm seeing pretty poor conversion when I'm using a lot of wheat malt. Oh well, not a big deal, at least it's consistent. Then the other thing for consistency is the pH level. Remember, there was a difference between these two, but I took a pH reading of both of these and they both came out at 5.2 by the time the wort had finished the boil, was chilled and in the fermenter. So they've ended up converging there. Now it's time for yeast, and I'm going to be using Stefan. I'm going to pitch around 68 Fahrenheit. I've used this yeast quite a bit recently in different beers, and one thing I've noticed is it's pretty lively.
Well, fortunately, fermentation turned out to be less eventful than my last Stefan brew, so no foam in airlocks this time. Now, a few weeks later, I took final gravity readings to see the capped mash had attenuated to 1.009 and the uncapped mash to 1.011. The beers came out looking good and were ready for triangle testing to see if participants could identify the unique beer when served with 3 samples. And first off, I decided to take the test myself. Now, I'm only semi-blinded as I'm going in knowing the variable and therefore what to look for, but that hasn't helped me much in the past, as my son can attest.
Before we start, how do you think I'm going to do?
1.
You're gonna get 1 out of 5?
I've done this 2 times, Dad.
Yeah.
I've never got 1 right.
I've never got 1 right.
Yeah, the 2 times I've done it.
I'm 0 for 10.
Yeah.
That is a special talent in itself.
So I'm giving you 1.
Okay. See if I can get a little bit of extra clove on one of these beers. Oh, picking it up there. Yeah, got a bit of a dark roasted quality to it, with also that kind of Hefeweizen style. It's an interesting style.
Guess of a lifetime.
I'm gonna go for red.
Nope.
Alright, alright. 0 for 1. It's okay. I got this. Oh, they are super, super similar. I'll go with blue. I really cannot tell on the taste. I'm not getting close. So I'm going to really focus on aroma with this one. So give these a swirl. I'm looking for just sort of notes of a bit stronger clove. They all have notes of clove though, which is what makes it so difficult. All right, I'm going to go with I've not tasted these. I'm just going by aroma. I'm going with blue.
And it's not.
It's green.
Nope.
You've poured 15 beers for me, and I've got it wrong 14 times out of 14 so far. I'm really gonna stir these around, really try to get the aroma. It would be kind of a shame to get it right at this point, but I'm actually thinking I know what it is. It's red. It's red! It's red! For me to sit here now and say, you know what I think I can distinguish this would be ridiculous considering my score right now. There's a slight aroma difference in this one, but honestly, I cannot reliably distinguish these beers. Well, look at me claiming expertise at the first sniff of a right answer. But look, this was a total fail for me. How about everybody else? Well, I served the beers to 20 participants, splitting the beers across different coloured cups. Participants received 1 cup where the mash was capped and 2 cups where all grains were added at the start of the mash. A total of 11 tasters would have to accurately identify the unique sample in order to reach statistical significance, and a total of only 7 did, indicating participants were unable to reliably distinguish a difference. Although I couldn't fool Will from the Brew Club. Good luck.
All right. If I'm just going off aroma, red may be the odd one out. I think red is the odd one out.
The odd one out is red.
All right. That was tough.
But for the rest of us mere mortals, capping or uncapping the mash during the ferulic acid rest did not create a reliably distinguishable beer. And I have a theory as to why. According to the Brewing Ford wiki, the enzymatic activity that leads to ferulic acid extraction during the mash rest is most effective at between 5.2 and 6.6 pH. And remember, my capped mash had a ferulic acid rest at 5.5 pH, while my uncapped mash was performed at 5.2 pH. So both were in the recommended range, albeit the capped mash a little bit more comfortably. Now, I didn't send these beers to a lab for analysis, but my guess is that while the capped mash may have led to more ferulic acid extraction than the uncapped mash, it probably wasn't by much, and therefore any differences remained undetectable to the majority of tasters. Look, even so, personally, given how easy this step was to perform with holding the darker grains until later in the mash rest, it's probably something I will continue to do when I'm looking for ferulic acid production, even with this result coming back as non-significant. Now, one beer I did send to a lab for analysis was a German Heller's export beer, where I experimented with fermentation pressure, and you can watch that video here.